Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian and this is number 22 of the Dev Diaries for Crusader Kings III, and today we're going to talk about a medieval tapestry. At least that is the title. What that really means is, hey, let's talk about game rules, let's talk about immersion by implementing more things that characterize, anyone that you either meet in the world or that you roleplay as. Now, this is a very interesting Dev Diary primarily because it kind of introduces more depth to any character that I meet, and I have, kind of I have a bone to pick with a lot of the topics in CK2 itself, because as you know, there are some topics in CK2 that just get me going just because they are so half-heartedly implemented. For example, caliphs. If you have ever watched any videos of mine, then you will know that I'm very, very sad about the implementation of caliphs in CK2 because they don't acknowledge that either or each are claiming hegemony over all of the world. They just live side by side like normal emperors, which is also weird to say because there are no normal emperors. That's not how the emperor title works. But you know what? Let's not get lost here. Let's jump straight into this wonderful Dev Diary, a medieval tapestry, a very interesting one. So, of course, when trying to model history reasonably accurately as we do in CK3, your starting environment might be a far cry from the just and equal realm you wish to rule, but determined players should be able to change the mores of their society over time if that is their fantasy. See, the thing about CK as a franchise is that you don't play a nation, you don't play, an organization in any form whatsoever, although I guess the dynasties could be framed as that. You play people. You play people with desires, with needs, with wants, with hostilities towards things, and so on and so forth. And the way this works is that only if those are modeled in a very believable way can I suspend my disbelief and say, you know what, I am immersed and I can go ahead. And when I played through the Gothic playthrough, and yes, indeed, it will end tonight, by the way, but when I played through 7 centuries, and I looked at the culture map, I looked at the religious map, and I saw all those things, and I came to the conclusion barely anything changed. In 700 years, Gothic culture is still exactly the same as what it meant at the start of this playthrough. And my religion, okay, I adopted a heresy, but nothing changed. The mechanics were the same. I thought to myself, this is not immersive. There is so much lacking here. People are barely simulated. There was no real culture shift with 700 years of stable reign of my dynasty. I think that is something that is incredibly important to address, primarily because it is something that does hinder, the quality of the gaming experience. So, let's just jump into this when it comes to what they're actually talking about in the Dev Diary, but just so you know, my thought process for this entire Dev Diary is essentially coming from the Gothic playthrough, where I experienced firsthand that very little in perception of things and, tenets and whatnot changes in CK2, which is something that will be much more changeable in CK3. So, we will talk about the people who don't feature heavily in most history books and media primarily. So, but we haven't just added more diversity, that variety is also much more readily available than it was in CK2. For example, all faiths and cultures on the map are playable on release, and the dynamic faith system will give you a much greater power to change the world. They've also added many different game rules, which is so excellent. Game rules are so good. When you grow tired of a vanilla playthrough, when you grow tired of all the religions being where they always are, of the Turkic conquerors also always coming at the same time, or the gender rules, for example, being the same every single playthrough, you can just change it. It adds so much variety, it adds so much more experience and replayability. I'm very happy that they picked up game rules again. This is the first mention, if I'm not incorrect here, about game rules in this entire Dev Diary cycle for Crusader Kings III, and it is very good to know that they didn't just implement them yet again, but also expanded on them. If you would rather play as a queen than a king from day one, the game rules let you do that without having to create a custom faith during your campaign. I just want to point out, but you can create a custom faith that does it, which is super cool. Very excited for that. There are other challenges out there to conquer and stories to explore. So let's go into the gender options, something that we already know from CK2. We also have that there both in lore variation but also in game rule variation, except it's even cooler in CK3. All gender related restrictions in CK3 are controlled by the faiths. Awesome, as we have an awesome dynamic faith system, all such restrictions can be changed during a playthrough. Very nice. For example, the view on gender tenet has the settings male dominated, equal, and female dominated. All the restrictions for women in male dominated faiths are applied to men instead in female dominated faiths. So let's take a look at this. You can see it right here. Male dominated, of course, the standard for the common religion in CK2. There are some in CK3. There are some exceptions also in vanilla, in real life, of course, but this is what it is going to be for most things. For example, all Catholics gain or rather lose opinion for female rulers. Men are stronger and better equipped to lead us in this harsh and unforgiving world, so we shall entrust them with governing our society. Then we have equality here, which is something that we also already know from the game rules in CK2 and the laws. It is foolish to deny skilled people a role in government purely because of their gender. We shall allow all who are able to govern our society. And then last but not least, female dominated. Here it is the male rulers that gain opinion penalty, and women have proven time and time again that only they have the wisdom and prudence necessary to properly govern our society. society. Now, this was also possible in CK2 via the reformation of an unreformed faith and choosing enetic clans, in which case it's essentially reverse, it's, you know, female dominated, which was already available, but this one is much more openly available because now it's also open to any Christian religion if you create a heresy of it. Even women historically held the highest titles and women's rights were limited. Women still had a vital impact on the world around them. There is now a spouse council position, which was not the case in CK2. In CK2, I would just randomly place my spouse anywhere in the council because you could trust them, they would never kill you unless they actually hated you, and you would have a decent advisor. But the thing about it was, in CK2, your spouse is insanely forgettable. Every now and again, you'll have to make them a gift. Every now and again, you might be able to make them into your lover, you know, that sort of stuff, but they are incredibly forgettable. And this will now change. Your spouse handling all sorts of duties, from negotiating with factions to raising additional troops. This is super cool because it actually makes it so that those closest to you, your family, isn't being ignored by the game and by you, but instead they are being implemented directly. I'm a little confused as to why my wife wants to present a grand gift to me in the courtyard. I soon understand, however, as Queen Gwenllian orders a group of soldiers into line. A complete regiment raised from my own lands, ready to serve you. This is a grand gift. Look at that, that's our wife. More troops to bolster the army, which I assume gives you a levy bonus, and then they will serve as my personal guard, which I assume either gives you men-at-arms or gives you assassination plot negative. So essentially, you know, you catch people quicker that try to assassinate you. This is very cool. Again, was not in CK2. Spouses were practically being ignored. It was just, you know, no matter whether you were a male or a female ruler, you're only married for the purpose of, hey, you know, either I want an alliance so that I can inherit things, maybe there's like a congenital, biological trait in there, like genius or quick or something, or at the very least, you know, it was just to create more more children to begin with. So there was barely any value to it, and that does not exactly add to the roleplay factor. Even if you have a spouse that doesn't like you and you don't like your spouse, there's still going to be some interaction in there, instead of the generic, hey, do you want to buy your wife a buzzard kind of event, and I'm very happy to see that they expanded on that. Like in CK2, we have a gender equality game rule, but with some improvements and added variation. The equal setting covers more areas and has fewer exceptions than it did in CK2, largely thanks to our dynamic faith system and the design philosophy mentioned above. It also comes with an inverted setting, where the historical gender status are turned on their head and women become the dominant gender in most religions. Very, very cool. I'm super excited to see that. That's going to be a very interesting world, primarily because I'm seeing this right here, right? High Chiefess Vyacheslava Sviatoslavana, I can't... They're very difficult names, okay? Of Chernigov. And she's a Rurikid. Now, my question is this just essentially an original Rurikid ruler that was turned around? Or is it, you know, a new character? How is this generated? I'm very interested in seeing how these worlds operate and the world generation operates. But I can also say that I'm very interested, for example, with Queen Urraca Fernandez to play with those gender settings and kind of, you know, try things out. You can see right here, by the way, that this is a CPU character and these two are player character, and this is also a CPU character. You can see it right here because this is you, and then Gracious Zealot and Insane Adventurer. So these are CPU characters. But very cool, by the way. I really like the background screens. I think that is beautiful art, and I'm very excited for the options that we have thanks to the new rules. Now, we got some loading screens, we got some event windows. I'm very, very interested in these event windows. Honestly, it looks so much more energetic. It looks so much more in the moment than anything before. And except, look at this tiny kid. Far from home, a stranger is brought before me. She has been waiting outside the castle gates for a week, my liege, my guard informs me. The woman bows deeply. My name is Kugurchin, your highness. I have traveled far and wide and seen many things, but my family and I are wary of the road. If you allow us to stay, I will happily share my knowledge of the world with you and be your loyal servant. Embrace Siddhartha, and this will be your home. The more the merrier, or we have no room for the likes of you. So essentially, become a Buddhist, or you may not join. The more the merrier, just join the way you are, or we have no room. Get out of here. So essentially, someone, you know, can come to our doorstep as a traveling merchant, or maybe as a traveling scholar. I don't actually know what this lady's all about. Kugurchin and I guess her child. You know what? I'm actually thinking, is this our guardian? Is this us? Is this us? I don't know. Maybe that's just her family. Maybe none of these are ours. But either way, these more dynamic events with wanderers actually coming and going and making it interesting with different people of different cultures and religions coming by and giving us more variety in how we can play the game with that, I think very, very interesting indeed. It will also affect what is considered sinful or even criminal in a faith in the game. It's great for drama and intrigue, and in CK3 we've given sexualities more granularity. Thank God. I hate how it is pictured in CK2. It is so binary, but in a horribly, horribly ineffective way. Nothing happens. You know, if you are heterosexual, you have no trait. Nothing happens. You are what you are. If you are homosexual, you do have a trait, but it just impacts fertility and who you can, you know, kind of persuade. By which I mean, what's it called? Not persuade. I forgot the word, seduce, who you can seduce. And the thing about this is, my problem with this is that if I marry my homosexual kid to any woman, they will always have children. It's just a lower chance, but nothing changes. There is no option for the homosexual character to say, you know what, I don't want to be married to this lady. I don't want any of this. Let me go. At least not that I've seen. Maybe there is an event. But there is nothing that actually goes that far and that makes all those things interesting. Characters that have the homosexual trait do nothing in CK2 vanilla, but in many of the mods, I think Game of Thrones, I believe after the end, and I think in HIP you have bisexuality, for example. CK3 goes even further and adds asexuality, although I don't know, this might also be included in like HIP or something, but I know bisexuality is, and that makes things so much more interesting, actually giving depth to how people see the world, how they see themselves and how they are seen in society is very, very interesting, because beyond that you would always just ignore the trait. It changes nothing in how CK2 plays, and I think it is quite interesting to see it in a much greater granularity and depth right here. So, in addition to heterosexuality and homosexuality from CK2, characters can also be bisexual and asexual. Sexuality is no longer defined by a trait, but has its own system, which makes it easier to handle for us and more visible in the interface for you. It also means that we do not frame heterosexuality as a default in CK3, which was also important for us. Of course, children develop their sexualities around the age of 10, and once set, it will not change. It's worth noting that we don't model sexual and romantic attractions separately in the game, so character sexuality sets both their sexual and romantic preferences. Right here, budding attraction. An event, I think an event title that we already know from CK2, but the event plays out a bit differently, I suppose. While playing with other children, I have found that I do not mind if I am paired with a girl or a boy for our more intimate games. A lot of the other children seem to have preferences, and some even make a big fuss, but I do not understand why. Both girls and boys are so interesting. You realize you are bisexual. This adds an entirely different layer to who we're role-playing. This adds an entirely different layer to who our characters are. And by the way, beautiful background art yet again. I also like actually how the clothes look on this one. This doesn't look very plastic, you know? I had the problem that I had so far with CK3 clothes, I think, is how plastic it looks, but this looks definitely fine. But the background is very nice, very artsy. Now, with that being said, I hope that my point when it comes to roleplay and how much this adds is clear. It really does remind me, I could rant about this topic for ages just because it reminds me of the Caliph topic where, you know, again, if you have two caliphs, they just don't acknowledge each other despite both of them claiming hegemony over the world. It is very silly and poorly implemented in CK2, and I can only hope that, similar to how they advanced on sexuality and preference, they also advanced on that when it comes to caliphs. We do, however, differentiate between sexual preference and sexual behavior in-game. A character's sexuality in and of itself can never be criminal, but certain sexual acts can be. Of course, you know, being homosexual is not something where the church says you are a sinner, but if you commit to a sin, the church would say that is a sin. If a faith's view on same-sex relations is not set to accept it, two men who have sex will get the sodomite secret, no matter their sexuality. While the AI doesn't pursue romance or sex with someone they are not attracted to, the player can sometimes choose to act against their sexual preference, and I can't read anymore, by the way, albeit with a penalty, and it can never lead to a lover relationship, so you can give into it, because that is, of course, more, you know, freedom to the player. The player should always be the one in charge of his own character, although the character is his own character, to a certain degree, but I assume that this is tied in with the stress mechanic. We have two game rules related to sexuality: view on same-sex relations, so whether it is accepted or not, and sexuality distribution. The second one being the more interesting one. I think this one is self-explanatory, but sexuality distribution, essentially, you know, you have the option to make heterosexuality fairly rare, or to make one of the other three, so homosexuality, bisexuality, or asexuality, very common. And my question is just, what would the population distribution look like here? How common would children be? Because all those fertility penalties would be quite impactful, I would argue. Now, that being said, here we have a screenshot of accepted same-sex relations. Love transcends physicality and into something so profound and wondrous that it cannot be restricted by mere gender. There you go. And then faiths down here, of course, tightly connected to gender roles and to, of course, the sexuality as well. All faiths will be unlocked at game start. African paganism from CK2 has been replaced with at least 6 new faiths: Rogue, Bori, Siguism, Akum, Wakism, and Kushitism. I honestly know nothing about any, but I'm very excited to learn about all of those in CK3. I think that is generally something that I have kind of missed. You know, it's difficult to roleplay African paganism when you don't really mean, or rather when you don't really know what that means. But I think with these different denominations here, with these different faiths, that is going to be quite a bit more interesting. All with their own tenets and flavor. For example, the Bori have a long history of matriarchs and worship the spirits, as they believe in spirit possession and that spirits can be either feminine or masculine. They are accepting of same-sex relation. The Ziguiks, on the other hand, worship their ancestors and believe that twins are blessed. How great is that? So, what do we have here? We have some different tenets. Adorcism enables to seek aid of the spirit's decision, so this is if you are possessed, then that is a virtue. Over here, Bhakti, rulers can decide to pick a personal avatar to venerate, generating a related bonus. Mortals cannot live up to the full glory of the divine, but by selecting a single aspect of divinity to emulate, worship, and devote oneself to, we can come closer to them than would otherwise be possible. I assume this is similar to what we have in CK2 for Hindu worshippers. And then over here, ancestor worship, this is the thing about siblings, not siblings, about, what's it called? We literally just talked about, my god, am I confused? Close family opinion. Twins, about twins being blessed. Like, I can't speak today, this is crazy. Prestige from level of splendor for newborns, plus 100%. Prestige from level of splendor when getting married, 100%. So this is a huge boost if your family is already established. Maximum long reign opinion bonus plus 50%, and characters of this faith gain an additional bonus upon the successful completion of a pilgrimage. And then over here, dharmic pacifism. Counter conversion resistance goes up, cannot declare holy wars or raid. Opinion of other pacifists plus 10, and makes calm a virtue and wrathful a sin. I assume that this is what is implemented if you choose the role, the game rule that we have down here. So, wait a minute, it's right here. For example, we have the game rules faith acceptance, which makes religious wars and disagreements a thing of the past. I assume that every tenet, or rather that every faith is getting this tenet once that is implemented. Hinduism has been split into 7 different faiths, in addition to expanding upon and fleshing out the 4 main traditions of Hinduism: Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, and Smartism. CK3 also sees the addition of Krishnaism and Advaitism. Buddhism has 5 faiths, Jainism 3, and many religions across the map have received similar diversification. We also have added a dualism religion with 7 different faiths. Dualism being singled out as a new, unique thing. Very, very, very cool. And now here we see India, by the way, which is a very good-looking India. Digambara, I have never heard of any of these religions. We have Smartism right here, we have Mahayana. I'm super excited to play here and learn more about these different denominations. Seriously, the granularity of faith and character, sexuality makes it super interesting to me, because it actually makes, or rather it stops my immersion from being broken by someone being African paganism, or, you know, generic paganism before all of those DLC came out. And then down here, we have randomized faiths as a game rule, so I hope that random, you know, Shattered World and Random World will be a thing in CK3 as well, but we know random faith will be, and, I mean, my god, look at this. What can you say? We have Valdensian, Iconoclast, we know those. Then we have Marano, we have Coptic, we have Poganstvo, Vidilist, we have Vapinia. I don't know half of these, but we have Catholic over here, I definitely know that. Kuranist, we have Gulat, we have Manichaean, of course, Karaite, we have Najdat, which is a subform, I believe, of Karaite, but I'm not entirely sure. So many different faiths. It is insane to me just how huge the faith diversity is, and I'm very excited to actually play CK3. Paradox, please, hand over the game right now. We have expanded the amount of portrait assets set from the 2 in CK2 base game to a grand total of 7 in CK3. On release, there will be a visual distinction between Western Europe, Northern Pagans in Middle East, Northern Africa, Byzantium, the Steppes, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India. We'd also have an even greater number of ethnicities, so you will see variations between those 7 groups. So, essentially, the groups themselves already have differences as they exist inside of their own group. Thanks to the new portrait system, ethnicities now blend seamlessly. When 2 characters of different ethnicities have a child, the children will look a bit like both parents. More on this in a later development diary. That is something that CK2 definitely suffers from. In my Gothic playthrough, I had a lot of different cultures mixed in, and sometimes 3 of my children would all have different portraits, all have different cultural portraits because of it. It was a very strange mix, because none of them actually looked related. Now, with that being said, this is the end of this dev diary, and Vervatuli, one of the developers, is leaving Paradox. Vervatuli, good luck to you. I hope that you are going to have an adventure wherever you go, and I hope that the next dev diary will be equally as interesting. The next dev diary will be about holy orders, so I'm very, very excited for that one. I got that from the actual forums, not from this dev diary. And with this being said, what is your opinion? What do you think? How you can now roleplay your characters? Do you think, you know, that there should be even more additions to, for example, the religions? Is there anything that you have missed? What do you think about the dualism stuff? The dualism religious group? You know, I don't think Massalianism is in it, but if I'm not mistaken, then Massalianism is kind of dualist. But either way, I want to thank the members of the channel that are making videos such as this one possible, namely the Barons, Aaron, Stefan, the Richest T, Snywolf, Emma Mello, Thomas, Lachlan, and Mitchell. Then of course also the Counts, Shifty, Wombat, and Kassen, and last but not least, the absolutely beautiful Duke, Suspicious Duck, Nathan, Knight of Squires, Kenneth, Alexo, Eric, and Aiden. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode of the Dev Diaries. Later, Alligator.